Hare Hare. So this week we're on chapter 1, text 40. The title of today's talk is The Three Steps of Personal, Familial, and Social Development. So I'll read the translation, chapter 1, text 40. This is Arjuna speaking. He says, when irreligion is prominent in the family of Krishna, the women of the family become polluted, and from the degradation of womanhood of descendant of Vrishni comes unwanted progeny. Dr. Nessa Carey, I talked about this in a previous talk. Dr. Nessa Carey, she's a biologist, a geneticist, and she was describing an experiment where there were some mice, unfortunately, were male mice, were unfortunately essentially tortured, in that the scientists would ring a bell, and every time they'd ring a bell, they would administer a small shock. Please forgive the nature of this experiment, but as this went on, the mice began to naturally cower in fear. They began to eat less. They began to live in anxiety. It's essentially torture. They then took these mice and they put them in with females to breed. When the females bred with these mice, the children, the offspring that were born, were also similarly stunted in growth, prone to bouts of anxiety and fearfulness, terror, not having heard a bell. So the scientists recognized that, well, this is epigenetics, right? How traits can be passed on, experiences, right, in a person's environment can be passed on from one generation to the next and have negative, deleterious effects from one generation to the next and manifest accordingly. Sometime later, some scientists looked at those results and they decided to try something differently. So they did the same thing, duplicated those results, but then they tried something else. Rather than just have the mice breed with the female mice, they instead took the semen and injected the female mice or other female mice who had not any contact with those male anxiety-ridden, terror-stricken, stunted male mice. The females had no contact with them. They were artificially, or they were inseminated. The females gave birth to healthy, fully, physically healthy, mentally healthy offspring without any manifestation of any manifestation of the experiences of their fathers. And Dr. Nessa Carey was describing, we don't know why that's so. Why is it that when the females see, or in the association of the male mice, then the genetic markers are manifest from the male mice, are transferred and then manifest in the offspring, whereas when the female mice are not connected with or not associated with those same mice, but are artificially inseminated, then those manifestations do not appear, even though it's the same genetic material in both cases. Why is that so? There's no scientific explanation for it. They've thrown it into the vat, the box, and labeled it epigenetics, but there's no scientific explanation of why this is so. We know the Vedas call it Garbhadhana Samskar. The consciousness of the parents has an effect on the nature of the offspring. This is what Arjuna is talking about here. Arjuna is saying, this is the battle of Kurukshetra. All the leaders are going to be killed. When that happens, adharma, the word Arjuna uses here is adharma bhibhavat Krishna. Arjuna says adharma is going to become rampant in society, in families, and in individuals. When adharma is rampant, the children of that social environment are going to be stunted spiritually, stunted emotionally, stunted even physically. And they're going to carry all of these negative traits, and it's going to happen this one generation after the next. Arjuna says, I don't want to have any part of that. And this is the title of today's talk, the 3 levels, if you will, of social development, familial and personal development. The first level, if you will, it's not necessarily a step, but the first level is adharma. And that's what Arjuna is saying. Adharma bhibhavat Krishna. When there's adharma, immorality, rampant, then there are problems. I don't want to be the cause of such problems. I don't want to be the cause of adharma. The next step up, the second step, is dharma, right? So Arjuna is saying, not adharma, dharma. But there's a problem with dharma. Dharma is only the second step. We need a third, because dharma is limited. There's a problem with dharma. And that is, self-preservation takes precedence over dharma. We see in the Battle of Kurukshetra, Dharmaraj Yudhishthir, the embodiment of dharma, threw out the principles of dharma when it was an issue of self-preservation. He's supposed to. We see throughout all of the 18 days of the battlefield, of the war of Kurukshetra, time and time again, dharma was thrown right out the window, because self-preservation takes precedence over dharma. So dharma is not enough. Necessary, and we'll come back to that, but it's not enough. It's merely the second step. We have to take that step up to dharma and be done with adharma. We definitely don't want to be on that stage. But even dharma is not enough. Self-preservation is not enough. What is needed is dharmamrita. Dharmamrita means the nectar of dharma. That's the third step. So we start out on adharma. Hopefully we don't start there. But the first step would be adharma, so to speak. The second step up is dharma. Necessary, but it's not enough. We can then toss dharma out the window and fall back down to adharma. So the second step, dharma, is not enough. We have to take the third step to dharmamrita. Dharmamrita is described in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is entitled Bhakti Yoga. That's the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The very last verse of the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about Dharmamrita, the nectar of dharma, that third step. The nectar of dharma is Bhakti Yoga. The nectar of dharma is love. The nectar of dharma is unconditional love. That's that third step. So personal development, second step dharma, absolutely necessary. Dharmamrita, love is required. Familial development and satisfaction, dharma is necessary. Dharmamrita, unconditional love, is required. Social development, social upliftment, dharmamrita is necessary. Unconditional love is absolutely necessary. Dharma is not enough. There's this story I was telling to the Gurukul students. It's the story of Kurmavatar, right? The demigods had been tossed out of heaven by the demons. And they went, as usual, running to Lord Shiva and then to Lord Brahma. Finally, they came to Lord Vishnu. Please help. And Lord Vishnu says, okay, well, what you need to do is you need to, first of all, declare a truce with the demons and go to the ocean of milk, churn the ocean of milk, take the amrit that comes from the ocean of milk. You drink that amrit that will empower you to defeat the demons and get back Amaravati, the heavenly kingdom. However, this is very important, Vishnu said, however, do not be distracted. Do not be distracted from the things that are going to come out of the ocean of milk. Do not lose sight of the goal. The goal is the amrit, is the nectar. Do not lose sight of the goal, Vishnu said. Vishnu says, do not argue with the demons. declare a truce, do not argue, do not engage in conflict with the demons. That's what demons do. They do not have sense control. They're going to get involved. Do not argue. Stay focused on the goal. That is the amulet. Sure enough, demigods went, declared a truce with the demons, and even before anything began in terms of churning the ocean of milk, Vasuki was there, the celestial snake, and to be used as a rope. So the demons were on one side and the demigods were on the other, and a snake, you have the head and you have the tail. No one wanted to hold the tail, right? Who wants to be on the the rear end of an animal? So the demigod said, why should we hold the tail? We're not going to hold the tail. We'll hold the head. And the demons, you guys, you can hold the tail. And this argument began to brew. Vishnu had to step in and say, wait. Told the demigods, focus on the amulet. Focus on the amulet. Grab the tail. And Vishnu himself, showing the example, went, grabbed the tail of Vasuki. The demigods then had to follow and began churning, and the demons had the head. All kinds of things began. First, the poison came up, where Shiva had to deal with that. But then all kinds of wonderful things began coming out of the ocean of milk. And that was causing many, many distractions, because all of these wonderful valuables began coming out of the ocean of milk, and everyone wanted them. There was Uchai Shrava, the celestial horse, came out of the ocean of milk. And immediately Bali Maharaj wanted the horse, and Lord Indra wanted the horse. And immediately an argument began to ensue. And Vishnu again had to say, Indra, he had to catch Indra's attention. Focus on the amulet. Dharma is knowing what needs to be done. The demigods were instructed, this is what you need to do. This is what has to happen. Go do it to get the amulet. The demigods knew what needed to be done. We know what needs to be done. We know the principles of dharma, but it's not enough. We get distracted by the good and the bad of life. We get distracted by the hala, the poison that comes up, and we freak out. Or we get distracted by the wonderful things that come from engaging in the principles of dharma. By engaging in the principles of dharma, we can accrue vast amount of pious results and consequences. By engaging in the principles of dharma also, as we see in the Battle of Kurukshetra, when we try to adhere to the principles of dharma, or for example, the game of dice, we stubbornly cling to the principles of dharma, a lot of harm can be done. So whether there's poison or all kinds of wonderful things that come when we engage in the principles of dharma, we are not to be distracted. We must focus on the amulet. Forget the hala, forget the Uchai Shrava and the Airavata and all the wonderful things that are coming out of the ocean of milk, all the wonderful things that are coming from our engagement in the principles, living according to the principles of dharma, all the unwanted difficulties that come from living the principles of dharma, like the story of Lord Ram, living the principles of dharma, one disaster after another. Don't be distracted by it. Churn the ocean for the nectar. Live the principles of dharma, but the goal is dharmamrita. The goal is love, because it is love that trumps everything. It is love that takes precedent over everything, even self-preservation. When it's time for self-preservation, we throw dharma out the window, not love. When we are in a deep, loving relationship, self-preservation is secondary. It's not even an issue. That's why dharmamrita, unconditional love, as described in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, last verse, look it up. Unconditional love. Now, what's interesting is love is not... Love is the hardest thing you will ever do. It is the hardest choice you will ever make. We will ever make. It is the hardest thing to do. It is not, flowers in your air in your hair and going through what is it? What is that musical with the oh good Lord in heaven. In the comments, please, if you remember the musical, it's the musical based on prior to the Second World War in Austria or Switzerland. And it's the huge family, the Von Trapp family. What's the name of that musical? Good Lord in heaven. Anyways, the Von Trapp family, it's this family of about a dozen kids, and they're dancing through the Alps of Switzerland, singing love songs or songs of joy. That's not love. I mean, it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But when I talk about love, I really talk about, there's another Gita class talking about movies. There's another movie where Liam Neeson, he's talking to his son. Liam Neeson, his wife's died, and the boy's mother has died. And Liam Neeson is struggling as a single father with this 7-8-year-old boy. And the 7-8-year-old boy is having difficulty. He's locking himself in his room. He's not eating. And Liam Neeson, he's very, very worried. I forget the name of this movie. Not relevant. And he's not. He cannot talk to his son. He's asking for advice from his friends and his family. How do I deal with my son? How do I help him through this very difficult time? Even though it's been several years or a year or so since his mom has passed, but he's still going through difficulty. Finally, Liam Neeson gets his son, takes him out, takes him for a walk, sits him down on a park bench, and he says to his son, now Liam Neeson, he says, my son, you're not eating, you're not engaging, you're not socializing, you're not with your friends. What's wrong? And the boy says, you're not going to be angry? His son, you're not going to be angry? No, what is it? Are you sure? No, just tell me, what is it? The poor kid. The boy says, there's this girl at school. She's the most beautiful girl I've ever known, but she doesn't even know I exist. And Liam Neeson, he looks at his son and he says, that's it? And the boy completely, very seriously says, Dad, what could be more painful than being in love? And the beauty of that was that Liam Neeson stopped and he says, yeah. He said that it's, Liam Neeson, who can compare with Liam Neeson, but the expression, he had to stop in this, he's correct. There is nothing, and that's of course mundane love. We're talking about dharma mrita, we're talking about unconditional love when the gopis see Krishna leaving them to go to Mathura. Krishna has a headache. Narad Muni goes to the Brahmins, dharma, right, to get the dust from the Brahmins' feet to put as a ointment on Krishna's head. The Brahmins say, we cannot do that because it's contrary to the principles of dharma. We'll go to hell. Narad Muni goes to the gopis. My dear gopis, Krishna has a headache. He wants the dust from your feet to put on his head, to cool his head, to make him feel better. The gopis said, sure. And then Narad Muni says, aren't you afraid that if you put the dust of your feet on Krishna's head, you'll go to hell? And the gopis said, yes, so. Krishna has a headache. And scraping all the dust off their feet, kilos of dust, goes to Krishna. Love takes precedent over everything. Self-preservation is irrelevant. That's dharmamrita. But it is not the love of Hollywood, Bollywood. That's not love at all. Read the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Read chapter 12, text 20, the last verse of the 12th chapter. Dharmamrita. That development of love, that love is that third step. That love takes precedence over everything. Everything. Dharma, adharma, everything. Then when we talk about personal development, familial development, social development, when dharmamrita, bhakti yoga, when love is the basis of everything we're trying to do, that is lasting. That is all pervasive. That is universal. Everyone is uplifted. That is the rising tide that lifts all boats. It has to be dharmamrita. But that love, that dharmamrita, that bhakti, it is the hardest choice. And it is a choice. It is a choice. It's a choice that we all must make. That's the nature of love. If there's no choice, there's no love. Love requires choice. We have to choose it. And it's the hardest choice to make. That's why so few people make that choice. I'm not talking about marriage. People are in marriage because of dharma. The marriage is not uplifting. The marriage is not loving. The marriage is not in any way conducive to the people within the marriage to develop and to grow. People can be in marriage because it's the principle of self-preservation. That's a step up, but it's not enough. We're not talking about marriage. We're talking about loving the person who has hurt you the most. That's a choice. That's what we're talking about. That's dharmamrita. When Christ says, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do," that's the love that we're talking about. That's the choice that has to be made. And few people can make that choice. But that's the third level. That's where our personal development, our relationships, our marriages, our society, that is what lifts society. Dharma is not necessary, not enough. When I was young, I picked up a mridanga for the first time, loved it, began playing mridanga, quickly became very good at it. Even as a young kid, the devotees would take me out, bring Maha Visnu to play mridanga. I was a little child. I'd play mridanga and the devotees loved it. Became very good at it very quickly. Went to Gurukula, put into mridanga class. The teacher gave me a wooden mridanga made of wood. And I'm beating on this wooden mridanga, no sound, hurting my hands. And I'm telling my teacher, I was 9, 10 years old, "Give me a drum. I want a real drum." He would not give it to me. Gave me a wooden drum. Would not permit, I was not allowed to touch a real drum. I was not allowed to go to the temple and play a drum for the kirtan. Wooden drum. Months, wooden drum. Thud, thud, thud. And then they give me the mantra for practice. Tereketa. Tereketa is tereketa, 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 tereketa. Tereketa over and over and over and over on a wooden drum. The most boring thing you can do for a 10-year-old, give him a wooden drum and have him beat on it for 45 minutes going tereketa, 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 tereketa. Weeks. I need a new mantra. I want a new mantra. Begging my teacher for a new mantra. Okay. Tereketa, tere, tereketa. Are you kidding me? Tereketa, tere, tereketa? Beating this wooden drum, weeks. Tereketa, tere, tereketa. Tereketa, tere, tereketa. I want a new mantra. I can do this. And then, of course, you can master that mantra in 5 minutes. Had me do it for 3 weeks. Here, take the next mantra. Tereketa, tereketa, tere, tere, tereketa. Tereketa, tereketa, tere, tere, tereketa. Tereketa, you get the point, right? Wooden drum. Months. I was not allowed to pick up a drum. Of course I did. Shh, don't tell anyone. Was not allowed to pick up a drum and play in kirtan for almost a year, beating on this wooden drum. But something happened. When I kept going through the class, kept going through the practice, put aside when the teacher record, now you're ready for a real drum. I picked up the real drum, began to play. The transformation was incredible. Absolutely incredible. The restrictions I had using that clay drum and using those mantras, when going through it, allowed me to be able to do things with the mridanga that no one else was able to do. I mean, outside of the class. Those in the class were much better than me in many ways. But those who had not gone to the class, had not persisted through beating on a wooden drum for a year, doing tereketa, dreaming tereketa for a year, those persons who had not done that were then unable to do what those of us who had done that were able to do, having gone through it. We had a broader scope, a broader range of things we could do creatively on the drum because we went through the restrictions of tereketa. So when devotees used to say, Maha Vishnu, can you teach me how to play Mridanga? I'd say, oh, sure, I try to teach them. Tereketa, is that all? They would want, 20 mantras in 2 days. I had Tereketa for a month. So I tried to, I want to keep them encouraged. And I realized after, 5 or 6 devotees who were just, it wasn't working. It will not work that way. So it came to a point very early on. I don't teach Mridanga. I do not teach Mridanga because people they don't want the Tereketa. We don't want Dharma. We want Dharmamrita. We want the joy of love. We want the joy of unconditional love, but that has to come through Dharma. Dharma is absolutely necessary. Not enough. You don't take a wooden drum and engage in kirtan with a wooden drum. It doesn't work. Dharma is a step necessary for that third step. But we must engage and live the principles of Dharma. Then have the ability to choose love. Without going through Dharma, we cannot choose Dharmamrita. The opportunity to choose Dharmamrita is not there unless we are living on the stage of Dharma. Dharma is absolutely necessary. Not enough, but necessary. Now, sometimes people say, well, Mahavishnu, Krishna says, Sarva Dharmam Parityaja. The problem with that statement is that they never quote the second line. Right? We hear it all the time. Sarva Dharmam Parityaja. Krishna said, give up all Dharma. Well, the second line says, Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. Mam Ekam. Me alone. Love me alone. Not in a narcissistic, fashion that we see in the world today. Sharanam. Krishna says Sharanam means shelter. Sharanam means what Arjuna did in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna said, Krishna, I need your help. That's Sharanam. Arjuna is saying, Krishna, please drive my chariot. Please help me. That's Sharanam. That's simply asking for help. Mam Ekam Sharanam. Prabhupada said that 50% of our income should go to the temple, right? That's Mam Ekam. You want to know whether or not we are ready for Mam Ekam? The definition of Mam Ekam, Sharanam, means when we get our salary at the first of the month, we go to the temple and we write a check for half of that amount and put it in the temple box. That's Mam Ekam Sharanam. If you can't do that, make sure you are living according to the principles of Dharma. That's going to enable you to come to that stage. But if you're not already doing that, that's the clue. That's the clue that Sarva Dharmam Parityaja is not the verse for you. The verse for you is the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, text 20. That's the verse for you. Engage in Dharma to come to Dharmamrita. Then when on the level of Dharmamrita, Sarva Dharmam Parityaja, throw it out the window. You don't need it. Because love takes precedence. Love is the hardest choice anyone can make. And that's why so few of us make it. So few of us make it. Devotees, non-devotees, so few make the choice of love. Love is not the Von Trapp family going dancing through the meadows of the Alps. That's not love. We know this. I'm not going to get into a big discussion about love. We know that love is not simply what we feel at a particular moment. Love is a choice, a deliberate choice, and a very, very difficult choice. It's a choice that has to be made daily. It's not like you get married and, I made the choice of love. Absolutely not. The choice of love, you have to make it many times every day. Choosing love is a daily, active, deliberate choice. And it's always, almost always, one of the hardest choices to make. On the other side, it's uplifting. But the choice itself is very, very difficult. The fear, the trauma that gets in the way of us making that choice, very difficult. Coming through the other side, uplifted. But making that choice is always the most difficult, one of the most difficult things we can do, the choice of love. That's enough for now. I'll see you next Saturday. Hari Hari.